Professor Daniel van Lille, our Executive Dean for the College of Business and Economics. Professor Tembi Tichaawa, our inductee this evening. Professor Umila Bob, our Respondent and also the Dean of Research from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Our online audience on YouTube and Facebook. Senior leaders of the university, members of Senate and other academics, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Sanmonani, Khwena, good evening, Thobela. It is indeed a great honor and special privilege for me to welcome you to the Professorial Inaugural Lecture of Professor Tembi Tichaawa. As I do so, I wish to express a warm welcome to his loved ones, special guests, and his colleagues. This is indeed a proud and joyful, yet a landmark moment for all of you, for Professor Tichaawa, and of course, for all of us here at UJ and higher education in South Africa and beyond. The inauguration of professors is a public ceremony in which newly appointed professors are inducted into the office by the Vice-Chancellor and deliver their inaugural addresses. The ceremony has its roots in the medieval university and serves multiple purposes. Firstly, it's an expression of welcome and an entry for new professors joining the circle of colleagues who are already professors. Secondly, it provides a platform for the professors to display their expertise in the discipline and showcase their research. In isiXhosa, we say, ukuthweswa isidanga kwisigaba sobunjengalwazi. This, loosely translated, refers to assuming the role of a professor. Of course, in colonial traditions subscribed to by universities, this refers to the gown and the cap. Traditionally, the wise one would accept a blanket, ingubo. Once we have listened to the inaugural address, the gown or ingubo donating the professorship will be formally assumed. Today, we gather to bear witness to the entry of Professor Tichaawa to the illustrious community of scholars at the university. It is a celebration of the contributions to the discipline and ultimately the impact on society. Professors provide a university with its identity, character, and academic legitimacy and integrity. The inaugural lecture is a rite of passage following the confirmation of the appointment of a person as a professor. This evening, ladies and gentlemen, we will listen to Professor Tichaawa as the gown goes to town. By this I mean that the power of the inaugural address is when the expertise is showcased beyond the corridors of the university and reverberates through society. It stands out as a moment of pride for the incumbent, the family, fellow scholars, the university, and ultimately society. For the German philosopher and diplomat Humboldt referred to the university as a whole community of scholars and students engaged in a common search for truth. Newman talked about teaching universal knowledge. And recently, universities have been viewed as instrumentalist, serving a purpose for the economy or utilitarian in purpose. I would hope that we can break out of these narrow conceptualizations and reflect on the university as contributing to the public good. Edward Said, in an article on defiance and taking positions, offers a formulation of the ideal role of the true intellectual as one who commands a vast knowledge of his or her discipline, who is rigorous in the analysis of literature, who views being an intellectual as a vocation, the intellectual who considers it necessary to step into the public sphere and to speak truth to power, namely to question, interpret, and understand authority rather than consolidating it. To step out of the boundaries of the academy, to connect oneself, to affiliate oneself, to align oneself with an ongoing process or contest of some sort, perhaps with the aim of improving the lot of the oppressed. The intellectual who functions as a kind of public memory to recall what is forgotten or ignored, to make the connections that are otherwise hidden, and to provide alternatives for mistaken policies. It remains then for us as a university with a Pan-African vision to derive our mandate as intellectuals and as professors. How do we embrace the role of a professor as a disruptor while continuing to be flagship carriers of our disciplines? This evening, ladies and gentlemen, we will listen to Professor Tichaawa as one further step in the journey of being a professor. This is a journey which does not culminate once the lecture has been given. It is a self-reflective pause in the journey of the professor, with a promise of more to enrich our minds and simultaneously contributing to the rich intellectual bodywork in the discipline. Let me now invite Professor Daniel van Lille to introduce Professor Tichaawa. I thank you. Ke a leboga, diabonga, baie dankie.
Good evening, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, and tonight a very special warm welcome to Professor Tichaawa's family. I got to know your husband and your father in 2009, and I had the pleasure to see him grow and develop not just as a professional, but as a human being over years. So Tembi, it's an absolute pleasure to introduce you tonight. And I'd also like to extend our heartiest congratulations to your family, understandably, who could not all be here today, but your colleagues, your loved ones, and the people who brought you to where you are today. Prof. Tembi Tichaawa was born in the village of Njembeng, Kubome, in the northwest region of Cameroon. He describes himself as an African tourism scholar who applies his knowledge of sociology and communication to develop our joint understanding of life and the world. His current research focuses on sport tourism, events, mega events, ecotourism, tourism, and impact investing, as well as tourism impacts. And it's quite a substantial range. Tembi attended the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, where he completed a Bachelor of Technology degree in Tourism and Hospitality in 2007, and a Master's degree in Tourism and Hospitality in 2009. And as an aspirant professor, got it cum laude. In 2014, he obtained a PhD in Geography and Environmental Management from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Between 1999 and 2006, Tembi involved himself in the tourism and hospitality industry. So he's a man of industry, and he's worked in various capacities within groups such as the Holiday Inn, Cullinan, the Ritz, the Portsmouth, the Mount Nelson, all based in Cape Town. And then his academic journey started in 2007 when he was appointed as a junior lecturer at CPUT. In 2009, he was appointed as a lecturer at the Walter Sisulu University in East London, and in 2015, he joined the School of Tourism and Hospitality here at UJ as a senior lecturer. And he was soon promoted to the rank of associate professor in 2017 and a full professor in 2020. And this is a remarkable journey, and tonight it's great to see that your family are here to celebrate this. And a bit premature, but I'd like to thank you to you and your wife and your children for the sacrifices that they've made to support you on this journey. Tembi has 83 peer-reviewed publications to his name, including journal articles, book chapters, and he has to date presented 47 papers, and his prof indicates that he has 801 citations and an H index of 17. And then what do you leave behind? Prof. Tichaawa has already supervised 4 PhDs and 19 master's graduates to completion, and is currently working with 6 PhD candidates and a further 5 master's students. And in that lies our legacy, isn't that, Tembi? Tembi collaborates extensively with a number of seasoned international academics in his field, including distinguished visiting professors, Professor Jarkko Saarinen from the University of Oulu in Finland, Prof. Robin Naku from the University of Mauritius, to name but a few. He has also examined a number of PhD and master's theses from many other universities within the country and as well across the African continent. In addition, Tembi is a member of several editorial boards, and he has reviewed numerous articles for a multitude of leading journals in his field. Again, about ploughing back, isn't that so? At present, he is the editor-in-chief of the African Journal of Hospitality, Tourism and Leisure. He has managed several research projects for the STH, the School of Tourism and Hospitality, linked to the National Tourism Sector Strategy for South Africa, commissioned by the National Department of Tourism. Tembi, Prof. Tichaawa, it's my honor to introduce you.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor, Functionary, the Chief Executive of Chief Financial Officer of the University of Johannesburg, Ms. Nolowazi Mamurari, the Executive Dean of the College of Business and Economics at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Daniel van Lille, my colleagues at the School of Tourism and Hospitality, the STH, and the College of Business and Economics, the respondent today, Professor Ermela Bob, who is the Dean of Research at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I would like to thank a few people today. First, my Director of School, Professor Diane Abrams, for the leadership and support since I joined the STH in 2015. I also would like to acknowledge the collaboration and support from my colleagues at STH, but also in the larger CBE. At the CBE, we are a family, and we support one another. The session and congregation of the PCC Bramley, Johannesburg, my spiritual advisor, the Reverend Dr. Aki Abraham, and the wife, Dr. Mrs. Patience Aki, families and friends watching online, my experienced research team that is based in Cameroon that have done all the field work since I started my Pan-African journey. That is to mention Ayaba Doris and Alphonsa Songwet, who have been instrumental as far as my research work is concerned. My students, especially the postgraduate students, those PhD students and master students that I've supervised, I owe a lot of gratitude to them, because without them, this moment would not have been possible. To my beautiful wife and my kids, I would like to thank you for the support, the love, and care. It is at such occasions that one actually confirms that the long working hours that you put in at the end is rewarding. So this is actually a bit emotional, because I do spend a lot of time away from them working. But I'd like to thank the Lord Almighty for his extravagant grace and divine favor in my life. I've been very fortunate to have been mentored by and led by top researchers in the field of tourism and tourism geography specifically. And in this regard, I would like to thank 2 black female South African academics whom, against all odds, have had a significant impact on the growth trajectory that I have taken. To Professor Camilla Swart, who supervised my master's, and to Professor Ermila Bob, who supervised me at the level of PhD. Together they laid a strong foundation, and today is testament of their hard work. I would also like to thank Professor Chris Rogerson at the STH, who took me under his wings when I joined the UJ and has been very instrumental in my Pan-African research journey. Dr. Kofi Achiampong, my former director at the School of Tourism and Hospitality at Walter Sisulu University. My international colleagues and collaborators with whom we have done several impactful research, Dr. Albert Kimbu at the University of Surrey in the UK, Professor Jarkko Saarinen at the University of Oulu in Finland, Dr. Gabriel Eshon at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana, and Professor Robin Nonku at the University of Mauritius. But most importantly, I want to thank the University of Johannesburg that gave me employment. UJ is a great place to work, and I have received several support from this university that has been instrumental in my achievements. Since joining the UJ in 2015, I've been able to, or lucky, I must say, to receive numerous research grant support through the DHET Capacity Development Fund, the University Research Committee, and the Accelerated Academic Mentorship Program. Today I would like to dedicate my lecture to my late parents, Pa Tichaawa Azaya Moki, and my late mother, Mercy B. Tichaawa, my late sister, Adele Ambang Tichaawa, and the recently departed Pa Achumungwe Zacchaeus. My dad was a teacher, and he always advised us, look before you leap. Those were his watchwords. Every move that you make should be calculated. And I think I made a really great move joining the University of Johannesburg. It's an important piece of advice that has assisted me in my everyday life, as well as my academic journey. In preparing for this inaugural address, I mulled over several topics. I thought about sharing one of my research papers, recent research papers with you, but I was a bit concerned that that would be too theoretical. And I felt that I should actually share my experience, my journey with you today. In that way, I came about choosing the topic of navigating the journey of becoming an African tourism scholar. Now, who is an African scholar? The past 2 decades have seen a major transformation in higher education and learning. Primarily, this transformation has been related to the need for increased African scholarship and the need to understand and present the African context. Indeed, there is an urgent need to improve the way and move away from Eurocentric knowledge production and Eurocentric worldview, which prevails on the continent as a consequence of the region's colonial past. Additionally, it is essential to address the challenge and misconception of indigenous knowledge production as backwards or primitive in the African context. The African scholar is one who addresses African concerns and aspirations, holds a sense of social responsibility, and incorporates diverse views. So when examining what or who an African scholar might be, a simple explanation could thus be an academic who has focused on decolonizing and reconfiguring knowledge or disciplines in order to reflect the Pan-African experience. I believe that in order to truly grow and develop tourism in Africa, it is crucial to understand how the sector works within the African context, taking into consideration its social, economic, and political dimensions. Quality African-centered tourism research is therefore imperative to inform policy and development. I therefore pride myself on being an African scholar and contributing to the broadening of tourism knowledge on the continent, whilst acknowledging the unique nature and characteristics of the continent. So before going into my research focus, let me start by actually sharing with you my research journey. Where did it all begin? I came into South Africa in 1997, and like many young children growing up, my dream was to become a soccer star. In fact, prior to my coming to South Africa, I had played football up to the National Soccer League Division II as a goalkeeper in Cameroon. In fact, my friends and classmates at school and members of my community were convinced that this dream will become a reality. However, when I arrived in South Africa, I found out that it was not that easy, and I quickly realized how challenging the South African context is in terms of everyday ordinary life in the country, and I soon found myself looking for other economic ways to survive. Work was not easy to come by. Joining the informal economy was the only choice I had to raise income, and this is how I became a car guard, working in various malls to try and survive and earn a living. After about 8 months guarding cars in Cape Town, I was offered a job as a security officer at a hotel. While higher education was always on my mind, it was from here on that my passion to further my education was truly ignited. And after working in various capacities, saving up some money, I was eventually able to enroll to further my university education in 2006. This decision was strongly rewarded when I graduated with a PhD at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2014. So from being a car guard in 1997, it had taken me 17 years to progress to earning a doctoral qualification. So as outlined by my executive dean, my research has extended across several focus areas: sport tourism, mega events, tourism impact and impact investing, nature-based tourism, and tourism impacts. So through my academic journey and in my quest to become an African scholar, I have conducted research across several countries on the African continent, including Zimbabwe, Eswatini, Gabon, Cameroon, my homeland, Botswana, Lesotho, Ghana, and Nigeria. Much like my football ambitions at a very young age, my academic career kicked off with an interest in sport and sport tourism. My eureka moment for pursuing sport tourism scholarship occurred when I was doing an assignment on the topic in a tourism development module offered by Professor Camilla Swart. At this time, South Africa was in the process of bidding to host the 2010 FIFA World Cup. The FIFA World Cup hosted by South Africa was, and to date remains, the first mega event hosted on the African continent and was conceptualized in order to bring in significant and much needed developmental benefits, including tourism. The event was also coined an African World Cup, and it was set to position the continent to positively benefit from a number of benefits, including tourism. At this time, sport tourism had been relatively a neglected field of research, with most of the research focusing on the global north or developed country context. So while the sector is growing and gaining popularity, there had been little research that presented the value of the sector in terms of tourism development, which was concerning when considering that countries, including South Africa, had already hosted a number of previous major sporting events. Moreover, positioning the 2010 FIFA World Cup at the time, it's Africa's turn, opened the doors for further research to be done on the topic, and this was when my work in terms of research began. I began conducting research on the 2010 FIFA World Cup, and this focused on pre-event studies, examining various factors, primarily the level of preparedness of South Africa's ability to host this event and the perceptions around the event. But most importantly, the leveraging opportunities that the event presented continental-wise. Not only are these types of events extremely complex to host or to stage due to their costly investments, the scale of these events and the fact that an African country was hosting the event for the very first time in its history meant significant media attention was placed on South Africa. Therefore, my research critically examined South Africa's ability to stage this tournament successfully. This introduced the need to assess key issues also, such as crime and safety and security, and how they were accounted for when planning and for the implementing the event in the South African context. So the bulk of research that we actually conducted in this period included topics and themes on event bidding, event planning, benefits of the event's impact, the politics of sport events, profiling those attendees that were to come and attend the event. The post-event analysis of the 2010 FIFA World Cup focused on the legacies of the event, as mega events are known to leave behind long-term legacies for the host destination. The research in this context, therefore, sought to examine the extent to which the positive effects or the negative effects of the events were strategically leveraged in order to contribute towards the development of the continent. The post-event context was the focus of my PhD research, which to date has been acknowledged as one of the few existing studies that has examined mega events legacies from a non-host destination country context. My research focused on leveraging impacts in Cameroon and Nigeria. Another key research focus was to critically examine the infrastructural legacies in relation to the stadiums that South Africa constructed for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. To date, this has been one of the major post-event research projects that was conducted in this regard and has led to the finalization of a doctorate under my supervision. This PhD was my first PhD to supervise, and it was the first PhD for the STH. From the year 2015 onwards, joining the University of Johannesburg marked a major milestone in my academic journey. At this point, where my navigation into Pan-African research began, I remember being asked by Professor Chris Rogerson, who is a distinguished professor with us, why all this research on South Africa? At this point, I began to reimagine my research foci and decided to expand its geographic scope to focus on destinations throughout the African continent. And I was fortunate to benefit from funding at the time, the first one provided to me by the Executive Dean, Prof. Daniel van Lille, to launch my research agenda on Cameroon. Prof, thank you, because with this funding, not only was I able to partake in research beyond the borders of South Africa, but I also broadened my research focus. From there on, my research diversified to emerging destinations and their use of tourism to advance their economies, develop host communities, and protect natural resources. The first example of the diversification of my research, exploring the patterns and characteristics of business tourism in Cameroon. In the context of sub-Saharan Africa, business tourism constitutes an important segment of tourism owing to its economic value and volume. However, the sector remains a neglected research area with few available tourism research studies or business tourism research studies, which are mainly, those that are available are mainly focused on the Western country perspectives. In this regard, business tourism is understood as being international travel for the purpose of attending meetings, conferences, conventions, exhibitions, or incentive trips, also known as MICE tourism. The emerging studies focused on business tourism in sub-Saharan Africa have suggested that the sector displays different sets of characteristics compared to the global north. These studies have argued that the Western concept of business tourism cannot be fully applied in the African country context. One of the first research initiatives that I undertook joining the University of Johannesburg is the paper on business tourism in Cameroon, like I said before. This research revealed that the sector has an important domestic component, which is largely missing from international literature in comparative terms. Further, the study built on available scholarship highlighting the informal activities that serve to drive the business tourism sector. Informal business tourism remains an important area to focus on, even during this COVID-19 pandemic, since it supports over 50% of the livelihood activities of African people. And as informal business tourism has been postulated to kickstart the domestic travel and regional travel in terms of what we see as trying to recover the sector as far as the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the continent. The second area into which I extended my research focus related to event branding and leveraging through major sporting events in the context of South Africa. In this research focus, it is argued that the overwhelming majority of previous scholarship focuses on mega events, particularly in relation to economic development by way of the tourism and destination branding benefits. The concept of homegrown events has not only been definitively investigated as a strategic area of destination branding outcomes. What is more, research into developing destination brands, especially in terms of sport event leveraging, has often been a neglected area of research in the past. So generally speaking, the developed destination context has been singularly the main domain of these types of studies. This presented an opportunity to investigate how sport tourism events can be successfully leveraged for strategic destination branding outcomes by extending the scope beyond the mega event to include homegrown events. Some of the key findings around this research team conceptualize the role of leveraging strategies and the activities of stakeholders during the hosting of these specific types of sport events to achieve augmented destination branding benefits. Identifying socioeconomic factors affecting the developing nations have led to the adaptation of sport event leveraging framework in relation to homegrown sport events. The study revealed outstanding opportunities for retaining sustainable tourism and for attracting new tourism markets through the implementation of effective leveraging practices that are mainly linked to stakeholder commitments, to investing in effective public-private partnerships. This particular research focus was conducted through a PhD project that I supervised. This was my second PhD for the STH and resulted in 7 publications in high-impact tourism, international peer-reviewed journals and edited books. The global impact of this research proved significant in future studies of homegrown event leveraging, as it has been cited in a number of times in other international peer-reviewed publications. Furthermore, the topic of homegrown event and sport event leveraging have attracted local and global academic attention, and it has been introduced to curricula on sport tourism event modules at some universities in South Africa. The third area of my research has been on nature-based tourism and sustainable livelihoods. Many countries in Africa have adopted tourism as their economic growth and development strategy. Nature-based tourism is grouped amongst the leading forms of sustainable tourism in the region. This is owing to the region's attractiveness in terms of its natural resources that it has, and this is also an appealing area or reason why tourists will visit the continent. Research in this domain mainly focused largely on ecotourism and wildlife tourism, examining community livelihoods, participation, and the role of policy. Both these two research sectors, or this research focus, actually talks about the role that tourism has in terms of poverty alleviation, what it can do for community development, and what it can do for the conservation of natural resources. Specifically, the focus on ecotourism was rather interesting. The focus was on the extent to which geopolitical dimensions impacted community participation and livelihood. This took account that development of this sector of tourism is influenced by socio-political context that it occurs in. In terms of wildlife tourism, attention was drawn to the Transfrontier National Park in Southern Africa. The subsequent studies published on examining community participation in this form of tourism within numerous African countries and have found factors such as centralized approach to protected areas conservation, fragmented policy framework, poor implementation of policy not only inhibits meaningful, effective community participation, but also results in disinterest and resistance for communities to be involved in tourism. A fourth and a more recent area of my research focused on impact investing. Now, impact investing is defined as socially responsible investing that produces triple bottom line outcomes. Essentially, these investments aim to create a positive impact beyond only financial returns. The past 2 decades have seen a steady rise in impact investment, particularly in Africa. Tourism has well been acknowledged to benefit from impact investment. Entrepreneurs have received funding through impact investors to be able to promote their businesses for the better, to create jobs for communities. However, one challenge remains, and it is the challenge faced by small businesses in the context of tourism in Africa, and this is the lack of financial resources for them to remain sustainable. What impact investment does is to bridge this gap. Other challenges include limited management skills and capabilities and good governance. And considering the importance of these small businesses to the socio-economic development, impact investment has become an important activity, and hence my interest in examining its impacts. I have begun conducting research into implementing impact investment and into its potential to address some of the challenges that I highlighted. However, while businesses have been tapping into the opportunities offered by impact investing, there remains limited understanding of this concept in the tourism and hospitality industry in Africa. The research I've begun to do therefore sought to broaden the scope of literature on impact investment, synthesizing it to the African tourism context, as well as present practical policy and managerial implications. So what is my agenda going forward? What do I envisage to do over the next 5 years, 10 years going forward, maybe? We are at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic has actually brought the tourism industry to its knees. No doubt about it. No one foresaw this virus coming in. The tourism sector had been one of the most important sector that drives economic development around the world. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a halt on international travel, and destinations across the world have been impacted. As such, this means we need to start doing research that needs to inform what we need to be doing going forward, not only in terms of the recovery of the tourism sector, but most importantly, building its resilience. How do we make tourism to become more resilient going forward so that it can withstand the shocks that may arrive in future in the nature of maybe other types of pandemics? Three different research teams have caught my attention. The first is a recovery framework for sport tourism events. I am looking at this as a very important research area because the sports sector is extremely vulnerable to crisis and has been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, bringing its associated potential positive impacts and future sustainability into question. There is a pressing need for sport tourism studies to better inform, through the lens of resilience studies, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and what it is that research can do in terms of creating a body of knowledge that can answer these questions. This research study aims to contribute to the development of a recovery framework for sport tourism in South Africa and will therefore serve as an addition to limited current body of knowledge on building resilience within sport tourism and encouraging future research on the topic. In doing so, the study will provide significant insights into the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on sport event tourism in South Africa. I argue that an examination of the current sport tourism event strategies and policies in South Africa would not only determine their level of resilience, it will allow for recommendations as to how they can be made more resilient going forward. The findings of the study I envisage will determine the willingness of fans to attend future sport tourism events in South Africa and to state what their requirements for such attendance will be. This will allow for the development of a new model of sport tourism events post the COVID-19 pandemic. The framework that will be developed for this study can then, going forward, be used by tourism events, stakeholders and role players, including various spheres of government, sports federation, sport event sponsors, destination marketing organizations, and the organizers of events. The framework can also be used to inform new policies on sport tourism in order to achieve a resilient industry in the face of future crises, which will ensure its sustainability. The second major theme I wish to address relates to the development of a framework for the hosting of mass participation sport events post the pandemic. This study draws attention to mass participation sport events, which are mainly athletic events and those that attract large numbers, such as marathons. These events, including cycling events and triathlons, have brought important socioeconomic benefits to host communities in the past. Therefore, this framework will guide the hosting and staging of mass participation events post the pandemic in the developing world, with specific focus on marathons. We are looking at 3 different marathons, and I must add that this study is being also conducted via a PhD study. research theme that I would like to examine focuses on the resilience and recovery of the MICE sector, meetings, events, conferences, and exhibitions. This study aims to examine how the MICE sector in South Africa responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it seeks to develop a resilience framework to be used by various stakeholders in the event sector. The resultant resilience framework we envisage will reveal how various components within the MICE sector contribute to or affect recovery and resilience. The study will not only unpack the nature and characteristics of tourism going forward in terms of events, but reveal key lessons which could aid in the development of sustainable and resilient tourism destination. In conclusion, in truly becoming an African tourism academic, one has to continue to do research that is insightful, research that is impactful and relevant to the strategy and policy environment in the Pan-African context. This means the need to conduct research not only taking cognizance of the fourth industrial revolution, but more pressingly looking at the recovery of the tourism sector and its resilience. An African proverb says, if spiders weave together, their cobwebs can tie up a lion. Indeed, there is nothing we as humans cannot accomplish when we work together. We can do far more for life, as far as I'm concerned, far more for scholarship. And I believe scholarship must continue to seek a strategic fit with industry and larger society to engender the brighter future for the world that we all seek. I thank you.
Good evening, members of the executive, deans and directors, colleagues, and most importantly, Prof. Tembi Tichaawa and members of his family and friends. It is an honor and privilege to be granted a few minutes to speak today. I have known Prof. Tichaawa for more than a decade, with a front row seat to his academic and research career from the time he was completing his master's under the supervision of Prof. Kamala Swart. When we engaged about my supervising his PhD, I was struck by his humility and passion to be trained in using multiple methodologies, specifically quantitative surveys, qualitative approaches, and spatial tools. Prof. Tichaawa intuitively understood the importance of embracing multidisciplinary and mixed methods, which are critical skills in tourism research, and ensuring that capacity is built to undertake empirically based research. As professors, we have the privilege of being accorded a title that confirms that we have contributed to knowledge in a particular field and training of the next generation of researchers, that we have demonstrable expertise and have influence in specific areas. In this context, what does Prof. Tichaawa profess about? He certainly ticks and exceeds the main traditional boxes of academic performance as indicated by the executive dean. Laudable achievement indeed, given that he graduated with a PhD in 2014. For teaching and learning, he has experience from undergraduate to postgraduate and professional training, curriculum development, and contributing to the decolonization agenda, which questions what we teach and understand to be knowledge, as well as who does research and for what purpose. In terms of research, he has substantial research outputs in key areas, including academic publications, postgraduate supervision, and grant writing. In relation to community engagement, his activist orientation, especially his mentoring and coaching roles and leadership in academic bodies, are evident. His research is generally field-based, and he has made a commitment to ensure that we do not only take from communities, but give back where we can as researchers. In particular, the importance of collaborative partnerships and the centralization of empowerment, specifically in relation to postgraduate students and emerging researchers, are underscored. There are other aspects which are emerging as being critical as we navigate a complex and unpredictable world and higher education environment that he excels in. He focuses on impact and excellence, especially in training the next generation of researchers, where he's meticulous, ensuring that students have critical skills and is hands-on in his training. He strategically understands the need for empowerment beyond academia and is inspirational in what he has achieved, why he undertakes research and is an educator, and what type of legacy he hopes to achieve. Legacy has always been a strategic aspect of Prof. Tichaawa's thinking, focusing on long-term impacts and what will outlive us. Perhaps the most laudable is the balance between personal and professional commitments. Prof. Tichaawa puts his family first always. To his beautiful children, your father's sacrifice is for you and the children of Africa. Paul Freire in 1970 stated, and I quote, "Education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world." Prof. Tichaawa subscribes to the latter. Prof. Tichaawa's African scholarship orientation clearly illustrates that education is by far the most powerful force in society that defines how we see ourselves, our interaction and perceptions with others, and our role in the world. Prof. Tichaawa remains steadfast. He remains committed to change and broader goals of sustainability and ensuring positive African legacy impacts, committed to being an African scholar rather than being a scholar and professor in Africa. His journey has relevance across disciplines as academics and higher education institutions grapple with pressing transformational and developmental demands in a constantly changing and unpredictable environment. Resilience, as articulated by Prof. Tichaawa, is essential to ensure effective responsiveness and relevance. On behalf of many of his collaborators from across the world, we wished Prof. Tichaawa well in his future endeavors. Thank you, Tembi, for all you have done and continue to do to lift up the African tourism research flag and make Africa proud. You are truly an inspiration in all you have achieved, defining your destiny in the face of challenging circumstances and sharing your experiences and expertise with the world. To the University of Johannesburg leadership, thank you for creating the environment for Prof. Tichaawa and other colleagues to excel and thrive. Once again, thank you all for this opportunity. Please take care and be safe.
Professor Bob, thank you very much for that wonderful response to Professor Tichaawa. Ladies and gentlemen, I am now going to call upon Professor Van Lille again to perform the roping. Professor Tichaawa, congratulations once again. I think, ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause. Thank you very much for sharing with us your amazing and inspiring journey of resilience and shared determination. I wish to congratulate you again on this very huge achievement. I think never before has the tourism industry needed the expertise and the wisdom of scholars like yourselves. And on behalf of the University of Johannesburg, I wish to extend our best wishes for your continued work in this area. And we look forward to receiving your wisdom in seeing this industry becoming sustainable and resilient and pull through this pandemic. And congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the conclusion of our proceedings for this evening. I thank you for joining us this evening and wish you a good evening. Thank you.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.